Mr. Bhutto. Thanks for joining us here at the Munich Security Conference.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
There's a big paradigm shift happening in the world with the US and China at loggerheads. Does Pakistan feel the need to be in one camp rather than the other?
I think the pace of that competitiveness has very palpable effects all across the world. I think you're feeling it here in Munich at the MSC, and the most of the world is engaged in that competitiveness from a Pakistani perspective. Historically, we've played the role of a bridge builder rather than, say, a dividing force, or there are some countries who are profiting or benefiting from the fact that these two countries, the United States and China, are increasingly competitive. But Pakistan has been in a different position. If you want to put us in a camp, we would like to see ourselves as bridge builders. And we've played that role in the past between establishing diplomatic contacts and the relationship between the United States and China. And going forward, we'd like to see ourselves as a country that can bridge that gap rather than sort of increase that division.
Is that going to be possible, that role of bridge building with that new Trump administration? We're all getting our first impressions here with them in action. What do you think for Pakistan?
The impression we get, or I get, from the Trump administration or from President Trump is that he's a deal maker. And in that context, I think, given the challenges that we do face in the region, they are topics and areas in which we can engage with the United States that fit within that roadmap. One such domain, which we talked about in the campaign trail and is at least articulated as part of the current government's foreign policy, is the possibility of making peace with India, or at least trading and engaging with India. I think a deal maker like President Trump, who's interested in playing a role for peace across the world.
It looks like the Trump administration is closer to India, New Delhi, at the moment. Does it like kind of, is it a problem?
A lot of presumptions about the Indian-American relationship were tested during the Ukraine crisis. I do think that with the China-US conflict and with the US's attempts to build up India as a sort of counterweight to China, does upset the balance of power in the region. It does have knock-on effects, for example, in the arms race between India and Pakistan. We are both countries that have immense challenges as far as poverty and unemployment, and there's far better places for Pakistan to be spending its money and for India to be spending its money. But if the US is going to try and establish India as a net security provider in the region, then Pakistan will do what it must to sustain or maintain that race.
Listening to J.D. Vance, the Vice President, yesterday, of course, that left the Europeans shocked here, his speech. What was your reaction when you heard that the West essentially was fighting on the open stage here in Munich?
It's not a surprise for us because we're used to the fact that the US looks after US interests first. And for us, it was very recently that President Trump first unilaterally tweeted that he's leaving Afghanistan. And at that time also, the EU wasn't consulted.
They weren't
the most non-allied ally outside of NATO on the border of Afghanistan wasn't consulted. The Afghan government of the time was not consulted. The US made up its mind and it did what it had to do. All I think it means is that the old norms of how to deal with the world have changed. I think Europe is learning to engage with that. Pakistan also has to learn how to engage with that. But from our perspective, the point that I'd like to emphasize is that everybody has to look after their people. That's their mandate.
When you see the West so fragmented, do you feel the urge to get even closer to China?
I think that China's trajectory has been steady and consistent and not as erratic and it is sustaining the
Not as
same.
erratic as the
Just,
US.
it's just not been erratic. I'm not going to compare it to exactly who. It's just not erratic. We're pretty erratic, so you can take that comparison. But they have a consistent, stable trajectory, and that has its appeal. We are in the neighborhood, and it makes sense for us to do business with China, to work with China. But it also doesn't make sense for us to cut us off from the rest of the world. We've had a huge increase in exports from Pakistan to Europe and exports from Europe to Pakistan. The US is still a massive, if not the largest, market for the people of Pakistan. So it doesn't serve our purpose.
Pakistan's economy is somewhat stable now, but politically there is a lot of chaos still. In order to deal with the security issues that Pakistan is facing, in relation to the Taliban, Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan in Afghanistan, and also Iran in some ways, do you think that will hinder there will be a lack of consensus to create a long-term security strategy that Pakistan should formulate now?
Pakistan's current security challenge is not emanating, I would say, out of Iran in any way, but it is a direct consequence of the US withdrawal from Afghanistan, which has resulted in a whole host of militant organizations gaining a lot more momentum. One of which is the Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan, which was a basically dismantled organization who did not maintain the capacity to recruit or to conduct attacks before the fall of Kabul. They've come back with a vengeance. You also have Daesh, and in addition to that, a whole host of subsets of separatist and nationalist groups that, again, is part of the previous operations. Their ability to recruit, their ability to conduct military operations, connected activity in Pakistan had been deeply diminished. Pre the fall of Kabul, one could say that we were more successful in dismantling and taking on these militant outfits within Pakistan than all of NATO was in Afghanistan for their counter outfits or for some of these outfits. In order to meet that challenge, Pakistan first needs an effective and comprehensive domestic consensus that is owned across the political spectrum, so we can take the fight to these groups like we have in the past, and I'm full of confidence that we can do in the future. And then we'll be in a position to have a serious conversation regionally and internationally about what are we going to do about this mess that we've left behind.
But this is not happening in Pakistan, the consensus.
Oh, well,
particularly because of Imran Khan incarcerated. That's his party.
Imran Khan being incarcerated or not is, I think, my father was incarcerated, and Mr. Nawaz Sharif was incarcerated. His daughter was incarcerated during Mr. Khan's time. It didn't stop us from forming consensus on important issues. Of course, if you choose to do the politics, that's just about yourself. So and that if you sort of free me from my cases, and then only, well, fair enough. I guess in that extreme landscape, it is hard to form consensus in politics. Full stop. Mr. Khan has never been broadly part of a consensus against these groups, even in the past.
Do you think the German government, the next one, should establish diplomatic ties with the de facto rulers of Afghanistan, the Taliban?
To engage with the threat of terrorism and militancy outside of the geopolitical partisan issues, because it should be a challenge that unites us all.
And the German government just this year expressed concern about deportations of Afghan refugees back to Afghanistan, complaining to Pakistan.
I think a bigger question to ask is, because Pakistan has also been very collaborative, how long can they host the next million people without any engagement or compensation or way to fund?
Pakistan's cracking down on Afghan migrants there. That's been taken up by Amnesty, several human rights organizations. So I totally understand that, Pakistan has to deal with like hundreds and thousands of refugees, but the crackdown has intensified over the years.
Particularly for those refugees in Pakistan who were only there on a transitionary visa, who were only there because they're waiting for their visa to the US or to anywhere else. They will have a more hostile time.
The crisis in the Middle East and possible fallout, which is related to Iran. And in Pakistan, the sectarian rifts are huge. Do you see it as a problem? How worried are you about the situation which is
I mean, more in
unfolding
the context
in the
of our
Middle East?
primary security challenger from these militant organizations that have seen a boost from the fall of Kabul. As far as Iran is concerned, it's our neighbor, and Pakistan now is neighbors to China, Iran, Afghanistan, and India. And because of the world's conflict with Iran, not our conflict with Iran, because of the world's conflict with Iran, our people and the people of Iran have not been able to trade, have not been able to engage economically. That's having outsized impact on the economy, on the poverty, on the unemployment on either side of the border. I certainly don't think it'll help if there's any sort of escalation in conflict with Iran.